The rumble of the moving truck was steady, vibrating through the ground as Marcus Bryant hoisted another cardboard box into his arms. The box was heavier than it looked, but Marcus was a man used to carrying burdens, both physical and invisible. He had been counting the days until this moment, the day he finally moved out of the neighborhood, where he had never truly been welcome. Sweat glistened on his forehead, and his shirt clung to his back as he carried the box toward the truck. Parked against the curb, he thought about how ironic it was. Most people cried or felt bittersweet about leaving their homes. For Marcus, it felt like breaking free from a cage. This house had been meant to be a dream, his reward for years of hard work, his sanctuary for his family. Instead, it had been poisoned by the constant harassment of the woman who lived just across the street, Karen. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her, and everyone in the neighborhood feared her. She wore the title of HOA president like it was a crown, patrolling the streets with her clipboard, jotting down violations, and knocking on doors to berate anyone who dared defy her vision of perfection. For Marcus, she had been more than a nuisance. She had been a nightmare. Complaints about his grass being a half-inch too tall, fines for leaving his recycling bin out too long, threatening letters about the unsightly shade of blue he'd painted his shutters, and of course, the unspoken but ever-present undertone. She didn't want him here because of who he was, not because of what he did. As he set the box inside the truck, Marcus glanced across the street. There she was, standing on her porch, arms crossed, face pinched, watching him like a hawk circling its prey. Even at night, with the street lamps flickering weakly and the world otherwise quiet, Karen was vigilant. He thought about ignoring her, keeping his head down, and just finishing the move. But Karen wasn't the type to let a man leave peacefully. Her shrill voice cut through the quiet like a knife. "You can't load that truck at this hour. You're disturbing the peace." Marcus wiped his brow with the back of his hand and exhaled. Slowly, before turning toward her, his patience was thin, worn down after years of enduring her behavior. But he wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing him snap. "It's 9:30, Karen. I'm moving out. I'll be gone by morning. You don't get to decide what's acceptable here." She shot back, marching a few steps closer, her robe flapping around her ankles. "This is a quiet neighborhood. We have rules. Can't just do whatever you want because you're leaving. There are procedures, guidelines, and hours for moving. Trucks, you're violating all of them." Marcus chuckled dryly and shook his head. "Karen, I won't be your problem after tonight. You can enforce all the rules you want on someone else. I'm done." But those words only seemed to enrage her further. Her face twisted, and her voice grew louder.
"Done."
"Oh, you think you can just walk away? You've been a thorn in my side since the day you moved in? The grass, the shutters, the vehicles in your driveway? Always breaking the rules. Always lowering the standards of this neighborhood. And now you're disrupting everyone with that monstrosity of a truck." Her words echoed through the cul-de-sac. Curtains twitched. Silhouettes of neighbors appeared briefly in windows, but no one stepped outside. They never did. They all knew how Karen operated, and none of them wanted to be her next target. Marcus straightened his back, feeling that familiar fire rise in his chest. But instead of lashing out, he simply said, "You know what, Karen? You can yell all you want. In a few hours, I'll be gone, and you'll have no one left to bully." Karen's eyes narrowed dangerously. "We'll see about that." With a dramatic flourish, she pulled her phone from her pocket and began dialing. "You think you can just dismiss me? Think again? I'm calling the police. You're violating HOA policies, blocking the street. Disturbing the peace. HOA rules aren't laws," Marcus interrupted calmly. But she was already speaking. Into the phone, her voice loud enough for Marcus to hear every word. "Yes, hello. I need officers dispatched immediately. There's a man blocking our street with a truck, causing a disturbance. He's refusing to follow the rules. It's threatening the safety of our neighborhood." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Threatening the safety. That was Karen's pattern. Twist the truth, exaggerate, paint herself as the victim. He leaned against the side of the truck, arms folded, and waited. It didn't take long. 10 minutes later, the faint glow of headlights grew into the sharp flash of red and blue. The police cruiser rolled slowly into the cul-de-sac, its lights bouncing off the neatly trimmed lawns and parked cars. The truck's engine idled, a low growl beneath the pulsing siren. As two officers stepped out, Karen practically sprinted to meet them, her hands flailing dramatically as though she were directing traffic. "Officers, thank goodness, you're here. That man," she pointed at Marcus with shaking hands, her voice high and full of false panic. "He's trespassing, disturbing the peace. He's blocking the road with his truck. He's been violating rules all night long. Need to do something before he ruins the neighborhood." The officers exchanged a look, their brows furrowed. One turned his attention to Marcus, who was still leaning calmly against the truck, watching the spectacle with an expression of wearied amusement. "Sir," the officer began, "can you tell us what's going on?" Marcus opened his mouth, but Karen cut him off, practically shoving herself between them. "Don't listen to his lies. It's been trouble since the day he moved in. I've reported him before. He never follows the HOA rules. He's dangerous." Marcus chuckled softly under his breath, shaking his head. He didn't even have the energy to argue with her anymore. The second officer spoke, his tone measured. "Ma'am, HOA rules aren't enforceable by us, unless there's an actual crime." Karen whirled on him, her eyes wide with outrage. "Not enforceable? He's disturbing the peace. He's breaking community regulations. That's criminal enough." The first officer sighed, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, we just need to hear his side of the story." Karen's face reddened, her chest heaving with fury. "You don't need to hear his side. I'm the HOA president. My word should be enough. Arrest him." The words hung in the air like poison, and for the first time that night, Marcus felt his calm begin to crack. Arrest him. For what? For moving out? For daring to exist in a neighborhood she thought she owned? He pushed himself off the truck and stood tall, looking the officers in the eye. Before he could speak, the low hum of another engine reached them. A sleek black sedan pulled into the cul-de-sac and slowed to a stop behind the police cruiser. The door opened, and out stepped Marcus's son, Daniel. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his stride confident but unhurried. The glow of the streetlight caught the edge of his jacket, and his sharp gaze immediately found his father. Marcus gave him a small nod, a silent reassurance that he was fine for now. But Daniel didn't look relieved. He looked focused, serious. He took in the scene, the officers, the flashing lights, Karen practically foaming at the mouth, and his jaw tightened. Karen turned on him instantly, her eyes narrowing as though she'd found a new enemy to conquer. "And who are you? Another one of his friends here to cause trouble? You people think you can just ignore the rules and do whatever you want? Well, not in my neighborhood." Daniel didn't respond right away. He just kept walking, his eyes never leaving hers, his silence heavier than words. And in that moment, Marcus knew the night wasn't going to end the way Karen thought it would, because she had no idea who she had just picked a fight with. Daniel's footsteps echoed on the quiet pavement as he moved closer to the group, every stride deliberate, every breath calm. He had learned long ago that control wasn't about who shouted the loudest, but who carried the greatest authority without needing to raise their voice. His father stood by the truck, arms folded across his chest, eyes tired but steady. Karen, however, bristled like a storm cloud ready to burst, her fingers tightening around her phone, her expression an exaggerated mask of victimhood. The two police officers, caught between the neighbors' complaints and Marcus's quiet composure, shifted uncomfortably. They weren't rookies. They had seen people like Karen before, loud, entitled, always convinced the world spun on their terms. But the shrillness in her tone and the insistent demands to arrest him created tension that clung to the night air. Daniel stopped a few feet away, his tall frame partially illuminated by the strobing red and blue lights. His voice was calm, measured and low when he finally spoke. "What seems to be the problem here?" Karen rounded on him instantly, eyes narrowing like a hawk spotting prey. "The problem is your father, or whoever he is to you, thinks he can break every rule in this neighborhood. He's disturbing the peace, blocking the road, and I've had enough. I called the police to deal with him, and now here you come, waltzing in like you own the place. Who even invited you here?" Daniel didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He simply tilted his head slightly, studying her, as though he were watching a child throw a tantrum. My father doesn't need an invitation to move out of his own house. The officers exchanged another look, and the older one cleared his throat. Ma'am, like we said, HOA rules don't fall under our jurisdiction. Unless Mr. Bryant here is breaking an actual law, there's not much we can do. Karen's mouth dropped open, scandalized. Not much you can do? He's a menace. He's been lowering property values since the day he moved in. He's constantly violating rules. Now he's disrupting the entire neighborhood with this circus act of a move. That's criminal enough. Daniel finally shifted his gaze from Karen to the officers, his voice still steady, but firmer now. Let's be clear. My father is doing nothing illegal. He's moving out, which means whatever disagreements exist between him and the HOA end the second he drives that truck away. What's really happening here is harassment. The younger officer shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his partner as though weighing his next move. Karen, meanwhile, stomped a few steps closer, jabbing a finger in Daniel's direction. Don't you dare lecture me about harassment. I am the president of this HOA, and I will not have outsiders like you interfering with how I run this community. You don't live here, you don't know the rules, and you certainly don't get to tell me what I can and can't do. Daniel let the words hang in the air for a moment, his jaw tightening. He took one step closer, and for the first time, Karen faltered. There was something in his Azan intensity, a fire that unnerved her. Still, she pushed forward, unwilling. To lose ground? What are you anyway? His son, his buddy, some wannabe lawyer. You think standing there looking tough means anything to me? Please. He almost smiled. But it wasn't amusement tit. It was the kind of smirk that came when someone didn't realize. It's just how badly they'd underestimated the person standing in front of them. I'm more than his son, Daniel said softly. Karen's scoff was sharp and ugly. More than his son. Oh, don't tell me you're one of those activist types, aren't you? Always ready to cry victim, always ready to cause trouble. Well, not here, not in my neighborhood. This is a place of order, of standards, and I won't let you come in and disrupt it with your attitude. The older officer finally stepped in, clearly tired of the escalating nonsense. Ma'am, that's enough. If Mr. Bryant is moving, he's within his rights. There's no crime here. Suggest you return to your house and let him finish in peace. Karen turned on him like a cornered animal. You're supposed to protect us, to uphold the rules. If you won't do your job, then maybe I'll call your captain myself and report you for neglect. How about that? Two officers who can't even enforce a simple disturbance complaint? The younger officer muttered under his breath, unbelievable. But Karen either didn't hear or didn't care. She had worked herself into a frenzy, her shrill voice bouncing off the quiet houses around them. More curtains twitched, more neighbors peeked out through blinds, but no one came out. No one ever came out when Karen was on the warpath. Marcus sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. He was exhausted, both from the move and from years of enduring this woman's antics. He opened his mouth to speak, but Daniel raised a hand, silencing him gently. His son's calm authority was palpable, like the steady hand of a conductor silencing an orchestra before the crescendo. Daniel turned his full attention back to Karen, and this time his voice cut sharper, more direct. You've made your accusations. You've wasted these officers' time. Now, unless you want this situation to turn against you, I suggest you step back. Karen's laugh was high-pitched and mocking. Turn against me? Please, I called. The police on him, not the other way around. I'm the victim here, and everyone can see it. You can puff up your chest all you want, but you don't scare me. You're nobody. Just another angry man trying to intimidate a woman doing her job? Daniel's hand moved slowly to the inside pocket of his jacket. Movement was subtle, deliberate, and immediately caught the attention of the officers. Their postures stiffened, their hands instinctively brushing against their holsters. But Daniel's voice reassured them before tension could rise. Easy, he said evenly. I'm just reaching for something that will clear this up. Karen sneered. What? A fake lawsuit? Some trumped-up paperwork? Spare me. You don't. Her voice stopped dead when Daniel pulled out the slim black leather badge case. flipped it open in one clean motion, the gold and blue emblem glinting under the flashing lights. The letters were unmistakable. Federal Agent. The silence that followed was electric. The officers immediately relaxed, their eyes widening slightly as recognition hit. Marcus's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, pride flickering in his eyes despite the situation. Karen, however, froze completely. The color drained from her face as her eyes darted between the badge, Daniel's unwavering stare, and the officers who suddenly seemed much more deferential. You're not serious?" she stammered, her voice faltering for the first time that night. "That can't be real. That's fake. People buy those online all the time." Daniel snapped the case shut and slipped it back into his jacket. With the same calm control he had displayed all evening. "It's very real. And unlike you, I don't waste police time with petty neighborhood disputes. I enforce federal law, which by the way includes statutes about filing false police reports, harassment, and obstruction. 3 things you've done in the last half hour alone." The words struck Karen like a slap. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. For the first time in years, she found herself on the defensive. The older officer straightened, his tone immediately shifting. "Agent Bryant, do you want us to proceed here?" Daniel nodded once, his gaze never leaving Karen's panicked face. "Yes, I'd like a formal statement recorded from my father regarding the ongoing harassment he's faced in this neighborhood. I'd also like you to document tonight's false report. After that," he paused, letting the weight of his words sink in, "I'll decide if further action is necessary." Karen's composure crumbled. She took a stumbling step backward, her hands trembling. This is ridiculous. I didn't know. I didn't mean I was just..." But the excuses fell flat. Everyone could see what was happening. The younger officer pulled out his notepad and began jotting down details, his tone crisp and professional now that the situation had shifted. The older one radioed dispatch, his voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. Karen stood frozen, her face pale, her bravado gone, and Marcus. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to exhale fully, a long breath that carried the weight of endless battles fought against her tyranny. His son stood beside him like a wall of unshakable strength. And for the first time, Karen was the one being held accountable. But Daniel wasn't done yet. He turned back to her, his tone calm but laced with finality. "Karen, you've spent years using fear and intimidation to control this neighborhood. You've crossed lines tonight you can't uncross. And now..." He let the words linger like the moment before a gavel drops in a courtroom. "It's your turn to answer for it." The flash of red and blue painted her face, her eyes wide with disbelief. She opened her mouth to protest, to argue, to claw back control. But this time no words came. For the first time in her reign. As HOA president, Karen realized she wasn't untouchable, and she wasn't in control anymore. The silence that followed Daniel's words was suffocating. The only sounds that lingered in the night air were the occasional chirp of crickets and the steady hum of the police cruiser's engine. Karen stood frozen, her face pale, her lips trembling, her once loud voice suddenly absent. Had relished in the sound of her own commands, barking orders like she owned not only the HOA, but every person within it. Now, that power seemed to evaporate beneath the weight of Daniel's authority, as though her crown had been yanked off. Her head in front of the very people she tried to rule, the older officer finished his radio call and turned toward Daniel. With a respectful nod, "Agent Bryant, we'll take the official complaint from your father now. Once we document the harassment and the false report, we'll proceed as you see fit." Karen's head jerked up, panic written across her features. Wait, this is insane. You're just going to take his side because his son flashes some badge? It's been the problem since he moved here? He doesn't respect rules? He doesn't respect the community, and now you're just letting him play victim because his son thinks he's important. Her voice was louder again, but there was no conviction behind it, no venom. It was desperation. Daniel's eyes hardened as he stepped closer, the authority in his presence pushing against her like an invisible weight. "No, Karen, this isn't about sides. This is about facts. The facts are simple. You've harassed my father for years under the guise of rules. You filed false reports. Tonight you wasted the time of these officers. Tried to escalate a peaceful move into a confrontation. Okay. And continued to lie even after being told repeatedly that nothing illegal was happening. He paused, letting every word slice into her. This ends tonight. Marcus spoke then, his voice tired but steady, like a man finally finding his footing after years of storms. I moved into this neighborhood to live in peace. But peace isn't something you allow, is it, Karen? You build fences out of paper rules, and then you hide behind them while you tear people down. I'm glad to be leaving, but before I do, I want it on record what you've done here. I want people to know the truth. The younger officer nodded, pen scratching across his notepad as Marcus spoke. Each detail, every petty fine, every baseless complaint, every time she trespassed, under the guise of an inspection, was written down. Karen's protests grew weaker with every sentence, her words overlapping his like a child trying to interrupt a parent. This is harassment, she wailed. He's exaggerating. None of this is true. You can't just... Daniel cut her off, his tone sharp enough to slice through her denial. Enough. Every word my father speaks will be investigated. And considering you've just been caught filing a false report, I'd say his credibility is a lot stronger than yours right now. Her breathing grew uneven, her chest rising and falling rapidly. For the first time, the neighbors who had been peeking through blinds began to step outside. One by one, porches filled with faces, men, women, even children who had watched Karen's reign for years, but had never dared challenge it. They stood in silence, their eyes fixed on the confrontation unfolding like a play they'd all waited far too long to see. Karen turned. Her voice broke. Don't just stand there. Tell them. You all know how disruptive he's been, how he's broken the rules over and over. Back me up. But the silence from the crowd was deafening. No one spoke. No one came to her aid. Instead, a murmur began, a whisper between neighbors, small comments carried on the wind. She'll find me for planting the wrong flowers. She tried to ban my kids from riding bikes. She threatened to tow my car once because I parked on the street. For 10 minutes. She made my wife cry. Karen's eyes widened as she heard the voices. For years she had relied on fear, believing silence meant compliance, believing her neighbors respected her power. Now, the truth was seeping out like cracks in a dam. Silence had never been respect. It had been resentment. And now, it was spilling into the open. Daniel's jaw tightened. He turned to the officers. Proceed. The older officer nodded. Karen Matthews, you are under arrest for filing a false police report and harassment. You have the right to remain silent? The words seemed to shatter her last bit of control. She lunged forward, her voice rising in a shriek. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. This is my neighborhood. You can't just... Her words were cut short as the younger officer stepped forward, gently but firmly taking her by the wrist and turning her around. The cold click of handcuffs snapped through the air, final and undeniable. The once untouchable queen of the cul-de-sac stood restrained, her arms behind her back, her face twisted in disbelief. The neighbors gasped, some covering their mouths, others whispering louder now. For many, it was a moment they never thought they'd see, the woman who had terrorized them finally facing consequences. Karen twisted in the officer's grip, her voice breaking into frantic pleas. You don't understand. He's manipulating you. His badge doesn't mean anything here. I was just trying to protect the community. You need me. Without me, this place will fall apart. Daniel stepped closer, his voice low but audible. To everyone watching, no, Karen. Without you, this place might finally have a chance to heal. Knees buckled slightly as the officers began guiding her toward the cruiser. She shouted again, her words fractured and hollow. This isn't over. You'll regret this. You all will regret this. But the more she screamed, the more her words lost power. Her voice, once booming across every street and yard, now sounded pitiful, desperate echoes that no longer inspired fear. Marcus stood beside his son, his hand resting on the side of the moving truck. His lips curved into a weary smile as he finally said what had been sitting in his chest for years. "I've waited a long time to see the day." Daniel gave a small nod, his eyes still on Karen as the officers placed her in the back of the cruiser. Justice takes time, but it always comes. The neighbors began to approach cautiously, their steps hesitant at first, then stronger. Man from across the street spoke up, his voice steady. "Mr. Bryant, I'm sorry. We should have stood up sooner. You made life hard for all of us, but you took the worst of it. You didn't deserve that." Others chimed in apologies, admissions, even small words of gratitude. Marcus listened, his expression softening. He didn't need their validation, but hearing it helped heal some of the weight he had carried alone, as Karen's screams faded. Inside the cruiser, Daniel turned to his father. "You're free of her now, and so are they." Marcus chuckled softly, shaking his head. "It's funny. I came here thinking this neighborhood was going to be my retirement piece. Turns out, the peace came when I decided to leave." Daniel smiled faintly. "Sometimes you have to walk away to win." The officers finished their paperwork, neighbors slowly drifted back to their homes, and the night regained its stillness. The moving truck was packed, the road clear. Marcus looked at the house one last time, not with regret, but with relief. Every brick, every wall that had once felt like a prison under Karen's reign, now looked like just another empty shell as he climbed into the truck. Daniel closed the door firmly behind him. The rumble of the engine started, the headlights cutting through the dark. Neighbors waved quietly from their porches. Not in pity, but in respect this time. Karen's voice echoed faintly from inside the cruiser as they drove past, but Marcus didn't look back. The street faded into the distance, and with it, years of harassment, bitterness, and pain. Ahead lay a new chapter, one built not on rules and control, but on freedom and dignity. Daniel glanced at his father, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Feels good to see justice served, doesn't it?" Marcus exhaled, his shoulders finely light. "It feels like breathing again." And with that, the truck rolled forward into the night, leaving behind the wreckage of Karen's crumbling empire and carrying a father and son toward peace. Knowing that at long last the scales had finally balanced, the reign of HOA Karen was over, and this time it was over for good.